Any story not worth embellishing is hardly worth telling. Cobb DeGoosh wrote that once, as he did much of this project. He just didn't know at the time we would turn his words into a visual history. This script was taken from Ephraim Begat Moses, written by Cobb DeGoosh and Ruth Hiltz, and combined with writings and interviews from other members of the DeGoosh family to develop this project. With that in mind, this endeavor is an attempt to help you get to know your family's ancestry. Through the pictures in this collection and the words of your relatives, we intend to help you recognize your heritage. You may discover in this undertaking where you inherited your work ethic, your general obstinacy, your family pride, or your knack for putting everything off until the last minute. You may realize how others before you have struggled, worked, endured, and overcome to get you where you are today. With that said, let's begin at the beginning. Minnie Belle Keyes married Elmer Ellsworth DeGoosh in 1887 at Hartland, Vermont. Elmer was born March 25, 1859 in West Fairleigh, Vermont. He was the youngest son of 12 children born to Moses DeGoosh and Anne Jones Wilshire. Elmer's expressions of faith were pragmatic and tempered by the demands for survival in a harsh environment. He clung to an unrelenting work ethic, and he learned to get along with his family, his neighbor, and himself by observing his perception of the Golden Rule. From habit, he chose action over words as a logical reaction in most circumstances. Elmer's father died when Elmer was just 9 years old. From then on, he cared for his mother until she died at his home in Cornish, New Hampshire in 1895. His wife, Minnie Belle Keyes, was born on September 17, 1867 at Hartland, Vermont. She was the consummate housewife. She made soap, washed laundry on scrub boards, and ironed on sad irons, heated on the kitchen range. She had the bread baked before sunup. Sewing was done by hand, and reading done by kerosene lamps. In the spring, she cooked dandelion greens garnished with crisp, crumbled bacon as a treat. Belle gave birth 11 times. Only 8 of her babies survived to adulthood. All of them were born at home, sometimes without a doctor present. Her son Rob was delivered by her oldest daughter Nellie, who was just 14 years old. Elmer built the coffins for his children when the unfortunate need arose. He is pictured here with Molly, the best driving horse in the area and difficult to manage, but he could handle her, and she knew it. Elmer and Belle's third child was a boy, Howard, born in 1892. He was the apple of his father's eye and the pet of his 2 older sisters, Nellie and Alice. The family is pictured here in 1894. Howard had a limited formal education, going only as far as the 9th grade at the Stetson School in Lyme. Howard was a man of few words. However, when sufficiently aroused, he could and often did express himself quite forcefully, but he definitely lacked finesse. Nettie Pushy was the third of 6 children born in 1893 to David and Mary Pushy. She was definitely her father's daughter. She shared his thirst for knowledge and was the first in her generation to attend school beyond the elementary level. She served as a domestic for the Dr. Stetson family of Lyme, New Hampshire, in exchange for room and board during her 2 years at St. Johnsbury Academy in Vermont. After leaving St. Johnsbury Academy and completing only the 10th grade, even though she was regarded as overqualified, Nettie taught in one-room schoolhouses until her marriage to Howard DeGoosh, because her mother decided it was better to be employed than to be educated. On October 18, 1916, Howard DeGoosh married Nettie Pushy and began a life together on a farm that would eventually include 13 children. Their oldest, Coburn, once stated that his parents started with him and then tried 12 more times to achieve such perfection. Such a specimen has never been duplicated. The first 5 children came to be known affectionately by the rest as the cream of the crop, as their first initials actually spell out the word cream, Coburn, Richard, Ellsworth, Anne, and Mary. We doubt the others harbored too much resentment, but we have heard, on good authority, that cream spoils too. Nettie was an accomplished writer of prose, poetry, and even a song she wrote for her boys overseas that she sent to the office of Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. And she got a reply from the Administrative Office of Social Correspondence.
The White House, Washington, May 9, 1944. Dear Mrs. DeGoosh, in the absence of Mrs. Roosevelt and her personal secretary, I am writing to acknowledge your letter of April 29 and the copy of your song. I'm sure Mrs. Roosevelt would be sorry there is no way in which she could help to carry out the suggestion you make. Perhaps the War Department or the broadcasting companies could advise you whether your song could be broadcasted as you wish. Very sincerely yours, Ralph W. McGee, Administrative Officer, Social Correspondence.
We mothers of America are from far and yet from near, are singing all together of those sons we love so dear. We mothers of America have done our noble best, so unto God Almighty in faith we leave the rest. And since the hand the cradle rocks is the hand that rules the world, that's why our boys are faithful to that flag o'erhead unfurled. We mothers of America have done our noble best, so unto God Almighty in faith we leave the rest. From childhood days we taught those boys how to love and to obey. That's why you'll find them loyal to the good old USA. We mothers of America have done our noble best, so unto God Almighty in faith we leave the rest. United all together now, Uncle Sam, we sing for you. We mothers love our dear sons, love the grand, red, white, and blue. We mothers of America have done our noble best, so unto God Almighty in faith we leave the rest.
All of Nettie's children proudly displayed a framed copy of her poem Happiness in their homes.
Just to be tender, just to be true, just to be glad the whole day through, just to be merciful, just to be mild, trustful as a child, gentle and kind and sweet, helpful with willing feet, cheerful when things go wrong, drive sadness away with a song. Whether the hour is dark or bright, just to be loyal to God and right.
Mother read at night. Every book that ever came into the house, she read. She seemed to crave everything she could learn from. Nettie wanted to teach again when David and Nancy were finally old enough to go to school themselves. When she went to Concord to apply for a teaching position, the man that interviewed her ridiculed her, saying something to the effect that, "You don't even have a high school diploma, and you think you can teach?" That spurred her on. She enrolled in correspondence school to complete her high school education, and with justifiable pride, at the age of 60, she received her graduate equivalent diploma from the American School of Chicago. Her children all chipped in and gave her a watch, a symbolic gesture, as each of her children was awarded a watch upon their own completion of high school, even if it meant financial sacrifices. Their hard work was worth it. Sadly, she died the next year. Nancy has her high school diploma.
As I remember it, that she started having those treatments. I remember they had the 40th wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
They called it cobalt radiation treatment. Burned her arm, her shoulder so bad it was raw. I always blamed that under the DDT, government approved insect killer.
Mm-hmm.
You used to get them bombs. They're that big around, that tall.
Mm-hmm.
So close the house all up, all the windows and doors, kick us all outside.
Mm-hmm.
Stay away in the back of the house and spray our way out through. Lock the door on the way out and get off the outside for a few hours.
Your mother did that.
Every
She
summer.
set it off every summer.
Well, I don't remember how many summers, but I remember this one summer in particular. We had to stay outside for a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd go in, she'd open up all the windows and doors and air it out.
Mm-hmm.
I always blamed it on that, but I don't know if it's true.
Howard went to school through the 9th grade. Cobb wrote, he was a poor business manager with bad feet, a difficult disposition, and a damn good liver. No account of Howard would be complete without acknowledging that he was an alcoholic. His drinking was often characterized by binges, followed by remorse, ostracism, a resolve to go straight, gradual redemption, and a shared apprehension for the inevitable but unpredictable lapse into the next glorious binge. Nancy wrote about her father, "It is a fact that he had a problem with alcohol, but he was one nice guy when he was sober, and he didn't have the money to drink daily. In fact, he drank the most during the winter months or the rainy season when there was less farming to do. Sometimes he might be drunk for 2 or 3 days at a time, and then he wouldn't drink again for quite a while. He may have kept a bottle in the barn to sip on during the day, according to some of the boys. During haying season, he might go a week or more without a drink. We now realize that alcoholism is a progressive disease, and having kids over a 20-year span, they would each have experienced him and his disease much differently." Nancy would also like us to remember a quote she learned from her mother whenever we think of Howard.
There's so much good in the worst of us, and so much bad in the best of us. It hardly behooves any of us to talk about the rest of us.
You didn't
Bottles of booze didn't last very long
You
on
didn't-
that farm.
Yeah.
They had to go to the store, they come back with a bottle of gin. And I wanted an empty bottle. And I can see him now pouring that full one into the empty one, filling both half full. And then drawing water off from the faucet and filling them both full.
Mhm.
Drinking like that.
Your
I still
dad.
gagged.
Your dad. Your dad.
Yeah.
Was that his drug of choice, gin?
I think it was just the economy bottle.
Yeah.
You'd go to the grain store to buy grain for the cows, and I think one bag of grain would probably get short in some way, and there was enough left to buy a cheap bottle of gin.
Yeah.
They come home pretty well snookered.
Yeah.
Mother wouldn't talk for 3 or 4 weeks. She'd just climb right up and say a word. The house was just dead.
She talked to you kids, though?
Very rarely. You stay away.
All this is not to say the man didn't have his strengths. His work ethic and ambition drove him, underlined by dedication to his children and devotion to his wife, whom he adored. When she died of cancer, it was the worst disaster of his life. He was heartbroken. Howard did his damnedest, and he did it well.
He was well respected. He was a
Yeah.
hard worker, and he helped all
Yeah.
the neighbors. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that letter when he had the rheumatoid arthritis that
Mm-hmm.
went around, and that proves right there that he was
Yeah.
doing something right.
Yeah.
He had a hard life, really did. I respect him thoroughly for what he done for me.
His granddaughter, Roxanne Carter, recalled a fateful day when she was about 3 years old, and he took her on a quick business trip to the creamery. Howard took Roxanne, leaving Nettie, who by that time was already sick with cancer, in care of their daughter-in-law Ida, who was a nurse. Roxanne recalls being small enough that she had to stand on her tiptoes to see over the dash of the truck. Cookie, the farm dog, was in the back of the truck, just along for the ride. The ride down was with no conversation, but it was the first time they had been by themselves, so maybe he didn't talk going to the creamery. When they arrived, he lifted her out of the truck and left her on the outside walkway, with Cookie sitting beside her. Once the business was finished, he picked her up and they headed back to the truck. He opened the door and he placed her on the floor of the truck and shut the door. On her little fingers. The immediate burn and pain was undeniable, but she didn't want her grandpa to feel bad by crying. By the time they got to the bottom of Pinnacle Road, the pain had gone into numbness. As a 3-year-old, Roxanne had not thought about how things would unfold once they got back to the house. They pulled up the driveway. Howard got out of the truck and came around to get Roxanne. That is when he discovered her fingers crushed in the door. A look of complete horror crossed his face. He opened the door, which hurt, but she still would not cry. He carried her into the house and placed her in Ida's arms and told her what had happened. Ida pivoted and took Roxanne right into the bathroom and plunged Roxanne's hand into cold water, saying, "This is going to hurt." She was right. If Ida has a hearing aid in her left ear, Roxy's scream was the initial cause for that. Nancy likes to share her father's love of cards. She says Howard gave each child a deck of cards when they came into the world. An exaggeration, I'm sure, but it illustrates that cards were an inexpensive form of entertainment that pleased the masses.
Stubborn Dad or Dick and Dad with the 3-day cribbage marathons. But after it was just 2 of them by themselves. And he just and they would drink and smoke and play cribbage for 3 days straight.
Wow.
Nettie wrote a letter about 1937 that was published and took 3rd prize. It was on the importance of the town in daily life.
Going to town is such an everyday affair that one might not consider it of much importance, but due to the fact that it is an everyday affair is reason enough to consider it of the utmost importance, a chapter in the book of our lives. And as we carefully read the pages, looking backwards, we are surprised to find that what we once considered of no importance has so proved its worth that we realize our lives would have been incomplete without it, and what once seemed great, now we understand, was not great at all. We live on a farm 2 miles from the village. We have 5 girls and 6 boys, and it seems to me that everything we do is in some way concerned with going to town. One monthly income is the milk check. The milk is carried to the creamery this side of the village. During the summer, the boys carry it in a wagon, as we have no car. We do our trading at the general store. We go to town, and the town comes to us. When school opens, the delivery truck from the store brings our supplies to us once a week. It is an interesting and pleasant task to plan our supplies so they will furnish us with 3 meals a day for the 7 days a week in a practical and satisfactory manner. And this includes the planning for 6 lunch boxes 5 days in the week for our children to attend the school at the village. They are carried in a school bus. Errands not done in person are done by means of the telephone. Again, we go to town over the wire, a quick and satisfactory way at all times of the year. Our rural carrier brings us our mail and takes any mail we wish to send. Again, we go to town and the town comes to us, as it does on Sundays when a car comes for the children and they attend Sunday school in the village church. There is a public library where the children are encouraged to read good books. If, when we went to town, we just rode out and back, we would be lacking in appreciation and imagination. When one sees cards from nearly every state in the Union, people evidently enjoy our hometown. We dare not allow ourselves to just take things for granted. but appreciate the fact that we have a wonderful place in which to live and glory in the seasons as they come and go. In spring and summer, winter, fall, going to town is no task at all, but a pleasure it is that I like to do. So I honestly say to all of you, glad I am of the chance to live. Glad I am of the chance to give. I'll do my duties without a frown. Just glad of the chance to go to town.
We always rode the bus to school because we lived like 2 miles from the school. If we lived less than that, then we'd probably have to walk, but didn't hardly anybody walk to school. Sue and John and I were 8 when we started school because the teacher was so rough that my mother wouldn't send us until we had to go, and you had to go by the time you were 8. So, but the teacher she got married the summer before I started school, and said that was as good as a dose of salt for her, because it changed her disposition completely. And so I still don't know why she held Sue and John back.
As the story goes, whenever Richard and Coburn would get into any kind of argument or fight, Mother would send them out back to fetch a switch that Mother would swat them with. They would spend a while whittling and comparing to be sure neither had a thinner or thicker switch than the other. Then they would head back to the house with their respective switches to receive their punishments, until the day came when, after intense discussions, they came to an understanding, and each returned to the house with a dead twig. Upon arrival, Mother declared, "It took you long enough." Lessons learned. Coburn confessed that he used to pick Mary up by the hair and drop her in the woodbin. He'd leave her there, kicking and screaming, until eventually someone would come by and hear her and let her out. Brothers. John and some of the others would sneak into the cornfield and smoke corn silk. Kent doesn't remember smoking corn silk, said they couldn't afford corn silk.
All that?
Couldn't afford it.
Couldn't afford it?
The only thing we could smoke was dry leaves.
Dried leaves. What kind of leaves?
Oak leaves.
Oak leaves?
That was even burn the best.
Dad and Stub taught Nancy naughty stories, which she repeated, of course, resulting in getting a knee slapped under the table during Sunday dinner when they always had company. She remembers Dad's shoulders going up and down as he silently laughed. In 1926, at the age of 35, Howard was stricken with rheumatic fever. Cobb wrote that there were weeks of morbidity, followed by months of recovery. He recalls his father lying virtually helpless in his sickbed, an eventual graduation from bed to wheelchair. There was a farm to run and 4 children in the house with 1 on the way, but Mother was his nursemaid, as well as taking care of all the household and family duties. There was, however, considerable help from the community, including a long list of monetary contributions totaling over $150. In those days, that was a lot of money. There was also a great deal of generosity in the physical sense, as neighbors helped chop wood, plant and harvest, and provide homemade meals. Howard defied conventional medicine of the time, which stated that he would never again be capable of strenuous physical work. Now you know where you got your stubborn streak. When Anne was about 9 years old, she came down with appendicitis, and as she tells it, it probably burst, as the first operation was to remove a grapefruit-sized lump from her back. She was sent to stay with her grandparents, the Pushies, for recovery, so that she wouldn't be lifting the younger siblings. And because Mother had many others to tend to and didn't have time to play nursemaid to Anne.
Mother kept saying there for a while, "Anne, stand up straight. Bring your shoulders up, stand straight." And but where I couldn't. I don't know, this one phase for 3 weeks. And so finally took me to the doctor, Dr. Wayman. And I was a family doctor. And then he sent me to Hanover and seeing that my appendix had become infected. Instead it was inflamed, began to sear off, cracked a bit, spread. And then like over my right hip, and I didn't know it at that time. And there was a big bunch, half the size of grapefruit. But it was low filming.
Kent also had a medical situation that resulted in an extended stay at the hospital.
It was strange that when I was in the 7th grade, I ended up with kidney problems. I was in the hospital for about a week. Never did know what caused it or what they did to make it go away, but I came home on a Sunday about 3 o'clock. This is in the summertime. We go up to Patrick's place to do the milking in the summertime. And I wanted to go. And the dad said, "You sure?" He said, "You've been having your vacation. Sure you want to go?" Yeah, I definitely did. About halfway through it, I said, "Why did I do this?"
Whenever Mother was having a baby, Esther Hart would come to the house to help with the delivery.